أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أما بعد، يقول الله في محكم كتابه وقرآنه المجيد وقوله الحق: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أهل الكتاب لا تغلوا في دينكم ولا تقولوا على الله إلا الحق، إنما المسيح عيسى ابن مريم رسول الله وكلمته ألقاها إلى مريم وروح منه، فآمنوا بالله ورسله ولا تقولوا ثلاثة، انتهوا خيرا لكم، إنما الله إله واحد سبحانه أن يكون له ولد، له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وكفى بالله وكيلا. آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And my heartfelt congratulations to you all, to the entire Muslim Ummah, and first and foremost to Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman on the advent of another holy month of Shahr Ramadān. May Allah make it blessed for you and for us, and allow us the tawfiq of attaining the maximum spiritual blessings within this month, and to attain forgiveness and greater understanding of His religion and closer proximity to Him and to His Ahlul Bayt bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. This year, inshallah, I will be speaking on a series that basically has to revolve, generally speaking, on the Christian religion. Now, the Christian religion has been addressed and approached from many different aspects. Sometimes from within, from a ecumenical, cross-church perspective. Sometimes from an antagonistic perspective, whether that is from a Muslim or Jewish or atheist perspective. And sometimes it is approached from a literary perspective. Inshallah, throughout the course of these lectures, I want to approach the Christian religion from the following narrow perspective. That perspective will be to understand and look at and address Christianity's claims, its proof positive claims for it being the true religion. And there are a couple of different reasons why I would like to do this. First and foremost is because many reports have reached myself, others, other teachers of ours who sit on the minbar of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, that there are many who are considering leaving the path of Islam. There are many who are considering leaving and joining either Christianity, or they are considering that maybe Islam is not the right religion and they should give a chance to other religions. And to be honest, this is something that is, from one aspect, commendable. The religion of Islam, with particular emphasis on the path of Ahlul Bayt, never told us that we are not allowed to expand our horizons, that we are not allowed to study and ascertain the veracity of other religions and their truth claims. But if we are going to be treating in this series the Christian missionary as if he is a salesman, then we're going to be looking at the actual beliefs of Christianity and kind of in the sense of someone who is opening up an Amazon package, or someone who is opening up a Walmart or an eBay or Temu package, performing a review of, is this exactly what I was sold? Or have I been sold something different? There are many in the modern context who know of the trend of, you order one thing online, you have one view, one aspect, one imaginary aspect coming in, reading a book. But when they make an Amazon series or when they make a Netflix series, the characters have completely other agendas or portrayals than what you came in thinking. Is this the similar case with Christianity? At the end of the day, if there are those of us within Islam, within the Shia school of thought, who are starting to give Christianity, who are starting to give the Bible, yes, the Old Testament and the New Testament, and even this terminology, will understand that the Old Testament, this term, is something that is not necessarily the most honorable terms that you could call that portion of the Bible. Because if we're looking at it from the Jewish perspective, they prefer that we call this the Hebrew Bible, or for example, the Jewish Bible. So when we're looking at Christianity, right, and Judaism will have its own role to play in the veracity of the Christian religion. Is this something that Christianity can use and rest its laurels upon to say, look, this is something that was predicted. This is something that was prophesized since the time of Moses, since the time of Abraham, since the time of Adam. Is this something that we find within their own books? Because we find that even in the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala quotes the debate between the two factions, between the Jews and the Christians, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will basically say that the Christians will go and say that the Jews have nothing to stand upon. And the Jews will say that the Christians have nothing to stand upon. But the Christians will also go and say, and this is one of the interpretations, and perhaps we can also ground this interpretation in the tafsir of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam, where he says the Christians actually have another attack in this ayah of Surah Al-Baqarah. What's this attack? The attack is that they, meaning the Christians are saying, they, the Jews, are the ones who are committed to reading the book. Right? And they, yet, even after having read the book, still have nothing that they have. They don't have basically a leg to stand on. And we find, even up until today, the year right now that I'm delivering this in, right, Ramadān 1446, corresponds to the year 2025. Up until today, and I don't expect this to change anytime soon, the Christians are not going to be able to hold a candle to their Jewish counterparts in saying that we have a better understanding of both testaments, right? And we'll say the Jewish Bible, out of respect for our Jewish brothers and sisters. They do not have a better understanding of the Hebrew, of the concepts that are being expounded and taught in the Hebrew Bible, in the Tanakh, right? They don't have that superiority over them. Nevertheless, they will say, despite their advanced reading that they hold over us, they still have not got a leg to stand on. We are upon the truth. And they'll use a number of different techniques. And both sides, Jews and Christians, will say that we don't want to resort to something that is known academically as eisegesis, right? Spelled E-I-S-E-G-E-S-I-S. Eisegesis, as opposed to exegesis, yes, is basically where you do hermeneutical waterboarding. Hermeneutical waterboarding is essentially where you subject whatever scripture you want to waterboarding, to torture, until it says what you want it to say. So while both sides will say that we don't want to go over there, we want the text to be able to say what it says naturally. We want it to speak for itself, right? And that's commendable. That this search for truth is honored by both sides. So what do I, coming, my religion, supposedly coming thousands of years after both of these religions, right? Or at least thousands of years later after the origination date of Judaism, and hundreds of years later after Jesus, alayhi salatu wasalam. And I myself, coming thousands of years later after that, what do I as a Muslim have to contribute to this? Throughout this series, inshallah, brothers and sisters, our task will be to look at Christianity using its own proof claims. So, does Christianity use the Quran? Does it use the Ahlul Bayt to try and establish itself as the truth? No. It tries in and of itself to use the New Testament, number one. Number two, it will try to use what they call the Old Testament, what the Jews will call the Hebrew Bible. They will try to say that, look, there is so much proof and evidence that this was always going to be the plan of God. And number three, and we'll come back to this point in later lectures as the nights of Ramadan go forward. Number three is personal experience, emotional arguments that I had a experience with God. God spoke to me. I see something happening within my life, within the lives of others, and that is testimony for me. Right? This is something that the Christians will actually use as proof, essentially saying that I can testify, similar to how a Muslim would say, Ashhadu, right, an la ilaha illallah. I testify using X, Y, or Z events that Christ has entered my heart. For example, these are the three major things that our fictional, in this case, in this series, right, our fictional Christian salesman, right, because I don't have someone next to me who is going to be going back and forth with me, our imaginary Christian salesman who is trying to sell us on this religion is going to be using these three major things, whether he admits to it or not. Meaning whether he's in salesman mode in front of us or he is in salesman mode in front of someone else. These are the three major things that we see and have repeatedly seen that they will use. And 2 out of 3 of these things we don't necessarily have a problem with. However, brothers and sisters, and now I'm talking directly to those brothers and sisters who may be on that verge, who may not have complete yaqeen. That's okay if you don't have absolute conviction in Islam, absolute conviction in the path of Ahlul Bayt. Yes, that's okay. No one is going to admonish you that you don't have all of the proofs. Right? This is, something that all of us eventually, got to, and once upon a time we did not have. It takes study. It takes time. I'm not going to, say, oh, take your time, learn all of Islam, and then go and see what other religions have to say, because I myself would be a hypocrite then, right? Those of you who have perhaps seen previous lectures of mine know that I myself am a convert twice over, right? Meaning essentially that I started off upon the Ismaili faith. And then eventually, without having gone into the intricacies of what do all of the source texts have to say, I saw that there were discrepancies. I saw that there were things that in my view were irreconcilable. And so I moved on to a different path, still within Islam, but I went on to the path of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Eventually, after a couple of years of devoutly studying that path, I came across not exactly things that were irreconcilable. The way how I came to the path of Ahlul Bayt was that I found that the narrative that the quote-unquote Sunni salesman was trying to sell me about Shia Islam had holes, had discrepancies, had things that were not adding up. So when I went and tried to find out and verify what the Shias said on their own, I saw that there was a discrepancy. I saw that this was not adding up. And through that, through my own curiosity, I saw that the Shia narrative actually made more sense. Then I saw that the Shias had complaints with regards to the Sunni school of thought, with regards to their beliefs, with regards to their account of history. And when I went back and I posed those questions to scholars, to the texts, those who had more knowledge than me in the Sunni school of thought, I didn't find, number one, either I didn't find answers at all, or number two, I didn't find answers that were satisfactory. But the thing that I'm trying to say over here now is, to my fellow brother or sister in Islam who is now considering Christianity, yes? I'm not going to say, wait, how do you know? Have you gone to the Hawza? Have you reached the level of Sutuh or Lumu'at or Bahth al-Kharij? Or, for example, which teachers did you go and study under? How far have you learned Quran? Are you a Hafiz of the Quran? I'm not going to go and subject you to all of these questions because I myself never went through all of that. And I will say even this, those who try to hide behind these questions, those who try to hide, whether it's in the Ismaili faith, whether it's in the Sunni faith, whether it's in the Shia faith, or whether it's within the Christian, Hindu, atheist, Jewish faiths, all of these, whether they are genuine or not, this is a hiding technique. Because if you have a question about the Shia school of thought, anybody should be able to come and question it, and those who are knowledgeable should be able to answer it, plain and simple. And they should be able to answer it satisfactorily in a way that is consistent with the sources of Shia Islam, which are, of course, the Quran, the Hadith of Ahlul Bayt, and there are other sources as well. For example, the scholarly consensus throughout the ages of the Shia scholars, etc., etc. And this is not our aim in these lectures, right? However, what I will say is that going back to those three things that the Christian salesman will be relying on to prove Christianity, what's one thing that you did not hear me say? And again, I am addressing right now my fellow Muslim, my fellow Shia, right? What you do not see the Christian coming forward with to prove Christianity is our sources. And this is very important. In polemics, it's good manners and it's standard practice that if you're going to try to debate me, then you need to bring proofs that I accept. If you don't bring proofs that I accept, then what priority should I go and give, me as a Muslim, to the Jewish Bible? What priority should I give to the New Testament? Who cares if Jesus says that he's God? And by the way, we will be coming back in subsequent nights to see in the New Testament, did Jesus himself claim to be God or not? And what are the texts that our fictional Christian salesman would put forward to us that we will then go and examine on our own to see, is this proof enough? But coming back to my question, we as Muslims, are there proof texts that they can use from the Quran, from the Hadith, that would then go and show, see, Jesus is as the Trinitarian Christian worldview portrays him as, presents him as? I would argue that although there are those who, and in the minorities, will try to look for the Quran, Quranic reference, the odd Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih al-Muslim reference, there isn't really a push within Christianity to look for proselytizing evidence from the Shia school of thought. And even what they do bring forward from the Quran, which of course is common between the schools of thought of Islam, even that, there are very logical, within the Quran, perfectly valid reasons to not accept their, what I would categorize as shallow readings of the Quran. So you as a Muslim, your criteria, number one, should be prove it to me from my sources. Not just an emotional argument, for example, that Jesus is more peaceful than Muhammad, alayhi salatu wasalam. Peace be upon both of them. That is not an argument. For example, the argument that Jesus is the only prophet who does not raise the sword. We will come back to this as well. Inshallah, each and every single night, we will be looking at a specific attack or a specific argument brought forward by the Christian, either towards Muslims or towards the general public. For example, one of the nights, inshallah, will be, why would the apostles die for this message? They knew that the resurrected Christ, they saw it by themselves, they were eyewitnesses, and they went to their deaths not renouncing this. We will come and examine these claims, inshallah. And because we will only be dedicating one of these sales points, right? And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I don't want anybody to, become uncomfortable. This is just for lack of a better terminology, because at the end of the day, proselytization is at the end of the day a sales technique, right? And at the end of the day, you have something to sell, and I am a customer, and I'm going to see, is this something that I would like to buy into? Right? So it's not meant to be demeaning or mean in any sense of the word. And inshallah, one of the reasons why I am bringing forward this series is because I have seen, whether from the Jewish perspective, whether from the Christian perspective, whether from the Shia perspective, sometimes these discussions, and I don't mean to come forward as a debater. Okay, there's no one here, unfortunately, to debate with me, right? But even debates, they sometimes devolve into shouting matches. They sometimes devolve into emotional things. Yes, emotional displays. Sometimes, depending on which audience you are in front of, and of course, in a Shahr Ramadan series, usually, normally, I would be in front of a Muslim audience. And therefore, points that I make, depending on how well I present them and how well I substantiate them, may elicit a emotional response from my audience. For that reason, this series will purely be between you and I, the YouTube audience. You and I, without the emotion that usually goes into these discussions, will try to the best of our ability, without bias, as best as possible. Of course, there is going to be some bias that will perhaps, find its way in. But the goal of this series is to distinguish itself such that anybody who is watching this on YouTube can present these lectures to a Christian friend, a Christian neighbor, a Christian colleague, someone who you don't mean to offend, someone who you sincerely want to just consider the opposing facts, the opposing narrative. That is what the intention behind these lectures is going to be. And may Allah help me and give me the tawfiq to be successful in reaching this goal. The majority of these topics, because we're going to only be looking at one claim at a time. For example, like the one that I just mentioned right now, that the apostles went to their deaths not renouncing that they saw Christ crucified and Christ risen from the dead, right? This is what the Christian will come and say to us very emphatically. We will be looking at one claim at a time. Therefore, the time frame that I'm giving myself is between 30 to 40 minutes. Not very long, but I don't want to go too long or too far into these. I just want to give as concise of an example as possible. For the most part, we will be relying specifically just on Christian sources, Jewish sources, other Near Eastern texts where possible. We will also be looking at some ayat of the Quran, for example, the ayah of crucifixion, and what potential other understandings of this verse could be. And if we have enough time, what I personally am leaning more towards and why. But right now, we will be looking at the pressing issues, and therefore this series is specifically about whether the Christian religion is true. That is why that third thing I said of the three things that a Christian missionary, quote-unquote salesman, will rely on is the Jewish texts, the New Testament, as well as those testimonies, those emotional experiences that they have seen, that God spoke to me, or I saw in a dream, or I saw a vision, or, for example, in Portugal or in the Philippines, yes, they see the Virgin Mary come and talk to them every Sunday. These are not things that we will be accepting. Because how can we verify those? How then could we go and falsify any religion? At the end of the day, what I spoke about this past Muharram was, how do I know that my religion is correct? And we looked at 2 nights per Usul ad-Din principle, meaning 2 nights on Tawheed, 2 nights on Adala, 2 nights on Nubuwa, 2 nights on Imama, and 2 nights on the Ma'ad. Now I would like to go a little bit more in depth because of the need of my culture, my time, my day, where Christianity is seeing a resurgence. And on one side, I'm happy. And on the other side, I'm slightly disappointed. On the side of me being happy, in the modern cultural context, as well as the political context, we see that Christianity is making a slow comeback. That there are those who are far more convicted and convinced that their religion, Christianity, Catholicism, whatever brand of Christianity, whatever flavor of Christianity they choose to subscribe to, that's fine. That's not our topic or our issue that we will delve into. It is making a comeback. Whether it is because of this reaction in response to the liberal world order, whether it is in response to progressivism, whether it is in response to the LGBT, especially with regards to the transgender movement, you find whether people like it or people don't like it, there is, however, this thing that we have to admit, which is the resurgence of Christianity. Prior years, there was a noted and a notable decline in the attendance of churches. In fact, Muslims were often the ones who were buying up these churches and then converting them into mosques. So, Christianity is no longer, at least from my perspective, I don't have data to go and back this up, but from my perspective, from my observations, there are many more people who at least we can go and say are less shy about coming forward with their Christian faith. This is something that in prior administrations, they were perhaps ridiculed and mocked for, that there was a quote-unquote war on Christmas. Now, perhaps we as Muslims, we were in our own bubble. And we did not notice this. However, having now looked into this myself, I have come to the conclusion that they were right. Those conservatives, those Christians who saw that there was a war on, quote unquote, war on Christmas, yes, where Hollywood, where the media, where we're trying to move away from saying, for example, Merry Christmas. And they were trying to go and say, Happy Holidays, something secular, because there are other holidays aside from Christmas that are also happening in that season. Happy Festivus, right? As some TV shows would term it. Now, for those who just want to go and wish all of the holidays at once, fine. But then they would come back and they would say, Happy Kwanzaa, yes, Happy Hanukkah. The one thing that they would all try to shy away from, and this goes even to the level of Google. Google would have doodles on their homepage. Whether it's for Martin Luther King Day, whether it's for Mother's Day, Father's Day, National Donut Day, they'll have some kind of doodle. Yeah? When, for example, the prominent Muslim boxer, Muhammad Ali, yes, when he passed away, there was a doodle in his honor. The one that Christians were consistently pointing out that they would always be silent on and miss was Christmas. And so, yes, there was actually a war on Christmas. Yes, there was a war, we should say, on faith in general. And there was this, perhaps, antagonistic view from other faiths, from other adherents of faiths, Jews and Christians, Hindus, who would come and attack Islam. And of course, with figures like Sheikh Ahmed Dirat, Dr. Zakir Naik, Dr. Shabir Ali, who at some times were very academic, at sometimes maybe not so academic, and they were a little bit more belligerent. Maybe our response as Muslims was not the best either. And so within the Abrahamic faiths, and outside of the Abrahamic faiths, right, even Hinduism, the response between each other was not the best. And therefore we did not see the common enemy, which was secularism, which was, and we're not saying that atheists are the enemy, however, this push for spirituality, and I'm spiritual but not religious, right? Which has been a common theme even from previous lecture series of mine. These were things that we collectively as the Abrahamic faiths fail to perceive and fail to combat. So from the perspective of me being happy, I'm happy that Christianity, faith in general, is making a comeback. From the point of disappointment, as someone who has studied the Christian faith, the texts, a little bit more studiously, and actually gone into the texts themselves, to some extent even trying to go into the original languages, the Koine Greek, the ancient Hebrew that the Hebrew Bible will use, trying to go into the original source texts. Those of you who know from my tafsir sessions, tadabbur sessions of the Quran, I'm a very big proponent of learning Arabic and trying to let the Quran in its original language speak for itself. This is something that we have, right? We have the original Arabic, whereas the New Testament does not have the original Greek. The Hebrew Bible does not have the original Hebrew. Yes? So my point over here is to say, although there is a push towards faith, and I'm not trying to undermine that, my own studies within the Christian faith, within the Christian religion, have left me disappointed because it seems that the reason why people are coming back towards Christianity is either because of one of three reasons. Number one, because of an emotional, like we said, that emotional, experience that they had. Experiential Christianity, where, I can now testify and say that God has spoken to me, or I've had a vision, or, whatever the actual case may be. That's number one. Number two, maybe because they just don't want to go towards this, extreme, and they would like the culture that the Judeo-Christian foundations of the Western countries were founded upon. UK, Australia, United States, Canada, these countries, right? The legacy Western countries. What they originally started off on was a Judeo-Christian footing. And I'm specifically saying Judeo-Christian, not Judeo-Christian Islamic. Because Islam, while it was there present, there were people who were Muslims, it's very hard to go and prove that even Thomas Jefferson drew much from the Quran in order for the foundations of this country to be set. And perhaps an argument could be made, but I'm not going to go and put my foot in my mouth and go and, say things that I don't have absolute knowledge of. So we'll just stick to Judeo-Christian, and if I'm wrong about Islam also playing a role, then I would be happy to be wrong about that. But right now, I'll just play it safe. That's number two, where they just don't want to go towards that extreme of what the secularists are bringing. And you find even the likes of Richard Dawkins are coming and saying that they would like to be known as cultural Christians. They like that feel-good feeling where they are at Christmas with their loved ones, and they don't, necessarily appreciate how belligerent and how down your throat the missionaries of the secular movement have become. So that's perhaps number two, what we can ascribe it to. Number three, however, comes from the Quran. And the Quran says that there is this mindset that had there been any good in this message, the message of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the message of the Quran, the message of the Ahlul Bayt, had there been any good in it, they would not have been the ones to beat us to it. Meaning, if a religion is going to be true, then, and this is now coming really on cultural terms, perhaps political, but also really a cultural psyche. And this cultural psyche says that there is this first world, and then there is the third world. Any religion that comes out of the third world, yes, or is predominantly seen and accepted by people of a skin color that is brown, or more colored than the Western skin colors, right? We're not saying that this is racism. We're saying that this is a cultural mindset. And this may be the reason why Christianity has seen a resurgence recently instead of other religions. Because Christianity is seen as not an Eastern religion, although that's exactly where Jesus is from. They see it as a Western religion. They see it as the underpinnings of Western philosophy, Western theology. So, had they had any, if this message had actual, gravitas, if it had actual bones for us to deal with, these people, meaning the Arabs, meaning the third world, they would not have beat us to it. And so I'm disappointed from that aspect, that knowing how, and this is an opinion statement that I will be making. I do not mean this in a mean way, but the proofs for Christianity are very shallow. They are not something that, are tough to grapple with. Yes? And even those, it seems that sometimes they can slip into other cognitive dissonances. Yes? And I say this still with utmost respect. But they're not robust, reasons to take that faith as true. Whereas in our series that we just did in Muharram, in the previous, in the most previous Muharram, we looked at a priori logical reasons that someone would accept Islam. That is not something that we can find. I'm giving a little bit of a spoiler, although I will be leaving it to the viewer at home to make their own conclusions at the end of each of my analyses. we still see that this cultural mindset allows people to push Islam off to the side and go towards Christianity without really much thought. This series is meant to go and look at it in greater detail, put that thought in, and then see if Christianity has a leg to stand on. We won't be looking that much, going back to Surah Al-Baqarah, on the Christian claim of whether the Jews have much of a claim to stand on. Maybe, inshallah, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the tawfiq, we will look with as much scrutiny and as much depth into the Jewish religion. However, the reason why the Jewish religion is not as much of a priority for us is because the Jewish religion is not a missionary religion. Christianity on our college campuses, in our chat rooms, in our mosques, and even in our neighborhoods, are trying to invite us to their religion without using our religion to convince us. They're using their own, and maybe this comes from that same cultural mindset, that our sources are better. Had they had something for us to actually pay attention to, they wouldn't have beat us to it, we would have beaten them to it. So maybe it's from that. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they're just so convinced that they don't even feel like it's worth the time of day to look into Christianity. And that's the exact mindset that I don't want our Shias, our Muslims, to fall into. Yes, go and study our books. There is far too much to study within fiqh, within usul al-fiqh, within history, within aqa'id. There's so much that we need to learn. But that doesn't mean that we become blind to what other religions, other schools of thought have to say about their religions. We live in a world where we're not the only religion. We need to know what they say. We need to know so that if nothing else, if not for our own, edification, for our own education, then at least for those who don't go as much into depth on our history, Muslim history, our aqa'id, our fiqh, usul al-fiqh, all of the other, Quran tafsir, all of these other topics, those who don't go so far into it, yet still have doubts, you're not going to be able to go and tell them, like I said, hide behind, why don't you go and look into Islam in depth before you go and make a judgment statement about whether it's true or not. They're not going to take that as an answer. You are going to need to step up. And unfortunately, this is something that is not necessarily taught in the houses. This is not necessarily something that is taught in the jami'as, in the madrasas. This is not something that the sheikh, whether Sunni or Shia, is taught. Therefore, when our youth have pressing issues, when they need these problems addressed, our Maulanas, sometimes even our speakers, they do not have a ready response that they can readily give, confidently give. And what more confident response could you give than to go and point to chapter and verse of their books and their sources, and to go and quiet this doubt and respond to it in a satisfactory manner once and for all. So, the new generation has new challenges, has challenges that, to be honest, this kind of series should have been made in prior. It should have been made by someone much better than me, someone who's much more well-versed than me. Unfortunately, waiting, I haven't seen it come. Maybe, inshallah, it will come, a series better than this one. And inshallah, that will be the go-to. But until then, let this series be the damage control. Let it be at least a tourniquet, a band-aid applied before we can get to the hospital, so that at least we can go and stop the bleeding, so that we can at least stop this trickle out of fellow Muslim brothers and sisters who don't know any better, and they're just making the emotional decision, and they're seeing that, the Christians don't have a sharia to follow, it's an easier religion to go to, and we are losing those people. Gone are the days, brothers and sisters, where Islam was, just on the rise simply because of the conversion rate. Now, the conversion rate is exactly the same, whether we want to admit it or not. And I've gone to countless communities where people have come and said to me that our children are not interested in Islam. They don't want to come to the majlis. They don't want to come to the Husayniyah. They don't want to come to the Imam Barga. They're not sure why we should even go and pray. They're not even sure why we should believe in this. Now, they want to be spiritual, and they really like the kindness, the message of Jesus as it is portrayed in the New Testament. They love that. So, we see this problem in our mosques. We see this in our centers. And yet, we don't have a ready resource to combat this. So, inshallah, with that said, inshallah, we are successful in our academic. We don't want this to become too polemical, because polemical works tend to become emotional. They tend to become mean and mean-spirited. And we want to try to keep this as professional, as academic, as kind as possible. With that, inshallah, brothers and sisters, we will see you tomorrow night for our first of these topics. هذا وآخر الدعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.